And I would like to ask my panelists to come to the stage and take a seat. My name is Michael Wolf. I'm a local leader of IxDA Cape Town. And I'm also the CEO of Formula D Interactive. We're a design studio here in Cape Town. And tonight, I'm going to host this panel and trying to harness the impossible multi-layered discussion around trust and responsibility in design. We have a very interesting group of people here, all kind of experts in their field in various angles of design, and let me introduce them to you briefly. So we got James Hagen. We just earlier on had a presentation from you. You're a student of design, and what's your speciality?
I don't think I found a speciality yet, but
that's good. Design doesn't really need specialities too much. Okay, and then we got Dr. Rael Futerman. You are a program manager at D School, and for sort of interaction design, design thinking, workshops, teaching businesses how to use design in their daily operations. Yeah, so what would you say your speciality is?
I think just staying inquisitive. I also don't know. Don't worry, you don't need to find out anytime soon. I think what I'm doing today is very different to what I was doing, a couple of years ago and again. So, yeah.
Okay, great. You also started up a ed tech or a business that does, tell us a little bit, like two words.
So we do soft skills development and measurement as well to provide that feedback to students and potential employees.
Okay, fantastic. Tatiana, we just heard a very exciting, inspiring talk by you. So you're a critical designer. Tell us just 2 words about your background.
Not really. There's no such title in the world. It's self-proclaimed. But yeah, I'm an industrial and strategic designer. I do the things that, design thinking, systems design, and a bit of teaching. But then I set some time apart in order to do the art version of design and forward thinking.
Okay, fantastic. Sihle, Tshabalala, a very inspiring talk. Thanks for that. I think what you're doing is sort of in the educational sector, entrepreneurs, but getting people, from very difficult situations, upskilling them so they can actually get into top earning jobs. And you're very successful. That you won multiple awards. You've been on the top 200 of Mail and Guardian and various other awards, TEDx fellow. So what inspires you every day to go to work? In short, in 20 seconds.
What inspires me is that each day, actually, I'm presented with an opportunity to change someone's life. That's what inspires me every day. Okay, fantastic. So, Sune, Stassen, at design, I don't want to say dinosaur, but.
I'm trying so hard.
No, dinosaur. They were the very agile ones that kind of jumped around and they kind of like. But very influential, I think, not extinct at all. You've just started up Open Design Africa. I can be funny as well. You're the founding director of Open Design Africa, the platform which started off, I think, as Open Design Cape Town, but now Open Design Africa with much bigger ambitions. And you're kind of driving this. So what is the core idea of Open Design Africa?
Sure. There's, that is to build capacity through creativity. In whichever way you see that, might it be to give people opportunities or an opportunity to learn new skills. But the core focus is creativity and to develop an international knowledge sharing platform in Africa. To put the top design-led innovators in healthcare and education and mobility on a world stage, and to also bring the world here and share knowledge and develop new skills, give people the opportunity that they deserve.
Fantastic. And when is it going to happen?
We are launching the 18th of October with the Human Rights Statue event in Langa. So please go and have a look at that. It's a global event from a Dutch artist, Zander van Bussel. And then we're moving to the castle from the 19th to the 23rd of October. And then after that, it's citywide activation till the 27th of October. So please go and have a look at the program. It's quite a jam-packed program.
Fantastic. So let's get into our topic. We already had a very lively debate outside and started off. I told them they must forget everything and just recall everything now. We've got the topic of trust and responsibility. I mean, when I just walked into the bathroom, I got tried out one of those Dyson dryers. It's called the Blade. I think it's one of the worst designs at all because I just don't trust, putting my hands into this thing. And this describes, one level of design of the debate, just one section of the debate that, which products do we trust and why? And we're only going to be able to touch on this a little bit and maybe get a little bit behind of what processes we can implement to make design more trustful and make designers more responsible, more trustworthy. So we got a big section here of education. So let's maybe start on the education sector. Sune, let's start you off. You're a big proclaimist of that design education is needed from very young age. And how would you implement? What would you think to introduce to design education that would have the outcome of more responsible designers?
I think moving forward in terms of the world we want to build, I think it's a lot bigger than just looking at the design industry and the creative industry. I think what is really important is the question, how do we develop a future-ready culture of problem solvers and change agents, not just the creative industries. I think we have a lot to teach people in terms of responsibility, how to use creativity. And what I mean by creativity, it has very little, well, in this context that I'm talking about, has little to do with designing something. It has to do with a responsible way of thinking and doing. So the world we are currently looking at, I find, and I think there's a lot of people that will agree, is we're dealing with a failing societal ecosystem where we've got really lack of core life skills in schools, kids with really bad rates at school, which starts that ecosystem that we have a lot of unsustainable practices. We've got very few thought leaders, problem solvers, change agents, and generally a culture that lacks integrity, empathy, and authentic connection with other people.
What's so special about design, to change that?
Well, design is only one aspect of creativity. If we look at the Fourth Industrial Revolution, if humanity wants to stand a chance to thrive one day in the future, something that's really important is to develop human skills so that we can have or empower ourselves to build that symbiotic relationship with the machine. And you can only develop those human skills through creativity. I think schools that still focus on STEM subjects like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are actually setting the future generation up to fail.
Yeah, great. Sihle, you're also in the field of education. We just chatted slightly that you want to expand your program from software programming into design as well. So how do you see the additional component of design, adding to the ability and capability of or empowering your audiences?
I think it's very much important that as we train these young kids to become good software engineers, software engineers are just devs, they just know how to write a few lines of code, and they get the product out. But I think it's very much important that we should have, a component of design that will enable now to stimulate new ideas, new approaches, but also now, come up with innovative ways to address, the social problems that now we have through design. Because I think, it's very much important that when we design for impact, not just now for the future, but also now making a difference in the legal spaces that now we get to occupy or spend time at.
So yeah, you're training ex-convicts and teenage mothers. How do you make these people and students trust into their own abilities to produce something, to be productive? How do you instill that trust in themselves?
I think also now what is very much important is that they are mentored by the people that can be able now to connect with them on a deeper level, because that connection is very much important. You know, we resonate in terms of our experiences. We come from the same backgrounds, you know, so what has always been missing is that component in terms of having role models, positive role models, you know. So firstly, you become that role model, and then through that now you are able now to inspire a new change, a new vision.
Great. Anyone else wants to comment on that? So design has also, you know, some interesting different approaches, and one of the approaches that we just been presented with is sort of like a more critical aspect in design, not necessarily to have a critical output, but how do we make designers trustworthy? Tatiana.
How do we make them trustworthy? Mm-hmm. What do you mean?
Or how do we make them? How can we trust? Can we trust in designers?
Right. I think designers, or us, we have a vital role of believing a little bit about ourselves and our capabilities. Design has started off as being this discipline where people go like, oh, this is like art. And then businesses started to see, oh, designers are able to rank up our numbers. Designers are able to make things appealing. Designers are able to do that. And we still don't have the power in order to be like, I'm not going to do that for you. And so we need to work together into making an autonomous break, like to become more autonomous and to be able to support ourselves and start discussing the things that we feel are wrong with marketers, with business people, with governments, with the leaders of our world. That's how you can make more trustworthy. And it starts again in education. And I'm all for ugly design. I'm all for things that you have to like search really through in order to get it. I'm all for things that are complex and complicated, to look complex and complicated. I'm all for things that requires, you know, someone to feel angry about for you to show that they should be angry about. Like, I'm for that. Yeah.
Just James, quickly, because there's some design educators here, and you're still, I think you're, yes, what, third year or so you're still second. Okay, so how do you teach someone, you know, critical thinking in design, and you got any examples how they do that at CPUT, for example?
I think there's a lot of interesting ways in which something as intricate as critical thinking can be taught. But on a personal experience first, I think one of the interesting things that I always find is very grounding in terms of a design outlook is speaking to people who don't really understand design as a background or something like that. I think as designers, we find ourselves stuck in groups of designers teaching designers. But then it's always grounding to go back to people who aren't designers and ask them how they understand things, and ask them how certain things that you design make them feel. I think that makes it very easy to suddenly understand what they trust and what they get out of your designs.
I think that inclusion of people beyond the realm of those who think like us, who act like us, is highly important. I think it's that shift away as well from problem solving, which, you know, people do so well. We're naturally problem solvers. But increasingly machines are becoming very good at solving problems, to problem finding. So how do we train problem finders? How do we shift people's thinking from just taking a problem at face value to saying, well, what are the underlying circumstances? How do we go deeper into exploring this, and move from just training problem solvers to problem finders as well?
Isn't it in Cape Town, so it's very significant that we live in these very divided silos still, more or less, and that the real challenge is to experience the other side of the silo and break through that. So how how can that be approached at university level or from designers? So how can we at CPUT, are there certain projects that you guys doing to explore the real life challenges?
I think one of the things that I find interesting about the way we go about being educated at CPUT is that we get given briefs that have lots of different layers of ideas. I think that you can look into solving problems that you find in all sorts of different areas. I think that it's always an interesting thing to be able to look at the problems when you get a brief and to be able to say, how can I solve this type of problem with this type of project? And going into sort of manipulating designs in any form to solve problems that you feel sort of connected to and the problems that you want to solve with the products and briefs that we get.
But here's an interesting thing, because that is really, as designers, you talk about receiving briefs, and now I've been a designer pretty much all my life, and now also operate on 90% of the time I receive briefs from clients, etc., and then you respond with a strategy, etc. But I think what Tatiana, what you wanted to highlight is that we also, and Rael as well, that we also have to look for those briefs.
Mm-hmm. And we also have to not be pressured. I can see that through many of especially the product design schools all around the world, that it's very much forced on making things. You have to always make an object. And making more object is making more things, making more plastic, making more landfill, and then you don't graduate without making this, object that might not be used by anybody. And also, it's like we're trying to create professionals, and professionals that are super concentrated on that one siloed subject, when we can still create diverse amateurs. Amateurs are perfect, they're generalists, and that's beautiful. And the fact that there is no kind of like jumping in between the different disciplines, and the fact that briefs come from a place of nowhere. It's like students, like honestly, sometimes teachers should just not give the brief. Like, don't ask them to do something.
The briefs are overwhelming.
Sometimes the briefs are wrong, and the students are just so eager all the time because they want to prove themselves, again, not just as designers, but to prove themselves to the discipline that is always demanding a certain level, and also so that they can be good for the businesses and the people, to be able to employ them, and then they don't want to employ them, and if they don't and it's just like, what is going on?
Okay. And sometimes those briefs are so overwhelming because it's like someone yesterday visited planet Mars and learned what the aliens have done and decided to come and implement that here. They don't realize that simplicity is beauty. In your design aspect, the more simple you are, the better that you are able now to communicate what is it that you want to communicate.
Okay. Great. I want to make a quick step to back to Rael, because one of the methods that we really use in design is user-centered design, and it helps with many of those aspects. Can you of
Sure.
really figuring out what is needed?
Sure. So I think the starting point for any design process is to kind of question the brief. To take a step back from it, not just go into problem solving, like I've said, but rather say, kind of, who does this affect, and how do we engage them in actually framing not just the solution, but framing the problem. So it should start with a sort of a phase of understanding, and not just, again, understanding solutions, but understanding the real problem. I think a lot of the time, designers are also designing solutions that aren't for them. And so they're bringing this sort of external knowledge and sort of implanting it into space and telling other people how to use something. And I think that starting point, like I said, is really about understanding. Because if we can teach that, and if we can teach empathy, and if we can teach people that experts don't know everything. And I heard a great saying the other day is that, experts are just, or experience is just expertise in old knowledge. And I think we need to create future-looking people. So we're starting with this understanding, a reframing of the problem, bringing people who it actually affects into the process, creating more inclusive processes around design, and then moving through this process together. So extending that sort of, people don't just use products, actually partake in the process itself.
Yeah, but I always find there's a barrier of actually really engaging with our users. I mean, do you find that business leaders you're dealing with on a daily basis are trusting in their users?
I think those that don't trust their customer, that's an interesting one. We're always talking about customers trusting business, but I think if we don't trust our customer, I think they're sort of bound to fail in a way. It's about that understanding and about understanding that the change, how people's needs change. And what I love about this place is that there's no sort of average customer. There's no average South African. We're in a space where we need to start sort of extending that understanding in a much broader perspective, thinking outside of the building, where we're not just framing project challenges based on, our bottom line, but actually saying what are some of the real challenges out there and bringing those insights into the process. That sort of shift from, I guess, profit-driven to purpose-driven organizations.
Yeah, great. Tatiana, you want to comment on this? On anything? No. So
I think also what is very much important, emotional intelligence is very much critical when it comes to design. I think firstly having to understand why Coca-Cola has, a red logo, why Facebook has a blue logo, is to be able now to connect into that deeper level. I think emotional intelligence is very much critical.
Yeah. Fantastic. So
and maybe also businesses have to reevaluate their metrics. So their metrics of success is usually customer happiness, or it is acquisition of more than 10,000 people. And these metrics are very stereotypical. And the way that businesses, they develop products is that they can get the largest amount of people to utilize their products. And if they're all utilizing their products, it means 100% they're all happy. But they don't understand that they create dependencies. The fact that you receive 1 million of the same notification after each other creates additional dependencies inside you. The fact that whenever kind of like you sign off on a service and it doesn't let you use that service before you either accept the laws or before you give a piece of your information. Also, they're like hooks and the traps. So I think that for the consumer to be responsible is sometimes to also step back from utilizing the services and maybe also start to bring up the conversation about them. And the metrics of the businesses should be different than customer acquisition or happiness, and less stereotypical ways of kind of like calculating this success rate.
Just to add onto the business side, interesting, Rael, what you just mentioned about becoming purpose-driven. I think there's a huge role and responsibility for creative people, and then I'm not just, again, referring to designers, but people that has creative intelligence, which includes your empathy, your emotional intelligence, your critical thinking, etc. We've got a huge role to play to help business to find creative ways to place meaning at the center of a business. Because a lot of business, if they want to be successful one day in terms of being sustainable, adding significance and meaning to their target audience, not just profit, but adding really significance and meaning, you need people with creative intelligence to understand that emotional intelligence and empathy side, to know how to use data, how to use coding, how to use the knowledge of the business, to use it in such a way that you actually add significance and meaning either in an environment or in society. And I think there's also, to come back to education, I don't think we often enough teach students, besides the fact that they need to understand how to be a graphic designer or an architect or an industrial designer, I don't think we place enough emphasis on explaining to them the actual power that they have by being creative. And that creative power needs to also be dealt with integrity, we do have the power in what we design, how we design it, where we design it, for who we design it, what environment. We do have the power, but then comes with the integrity and the responsibility to change how people communicate, how they behave, how they feed, how they travel. That's massive responsibility, but through that, I think if we can make our students more aware of that power, they will understand and look at things differently in terms of how they approach things and ask the same questions. And just one more thing, what's quite interesting in terms of education for tertiary as well. I don't think we often teach our students that, yes, you have this great ability to solve local or to look at local challenges and come up with solutions or to find what the problems are. But I don't think we teach them enough that, yes, it's great to have a local responsibility and sensitivity, but if you make them aware of that there's many other countries and communities that are faced with the same challenges, you are immediately, again, training skills for global citizenship. You are training people that thinks further in terms of whatever business or whatever product or environment or system they create does have relevance somewhere else in the world. And that helps him to grow business as well.
Yeah. Broadening the horizons of design and reach out. That's a great point. I want to give maybe the last, we're running out of time, but I want to give the last couple of minutes as well to some audience questions, if you have any. Is anyone who wants to ask a question? Okay, let's start. I have a hand up there.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I just wanted to ask around the question of the circular economy and the closed loop design. In terms of talking about responsibility, I haven't heard any kind of nod in that direction, because I think locally and globally it's very, very closely connected. And whether we're talking about systems or products, I think it would also guide us, students and professionals, so to speak, away from things that have no sustainability, but also may not be able to be disassembled responsibly and kept in the loop, so we're not mining new resources, however productive or useful or important a solution is. So I just wondered what your take would be on that. Any of you?
Anyone who wants to respond to that?
Sure. I think the idea of responsibility beyond just human needs is critical in that space. And when you're looking at that water bottle idea earlier, and that's a perfect example of sort of responsible to our customers, but not to the greater picture. So I think part of that and part of education is this idea of what is responsible. We don't just need to be responsible to one another, but where do we exist actually? And if we look at those futures, and I like the idea of the critical design in that space, just to say, well, if we do this now, what is that future going to look like? And to bring these kind of almost future responsibilities into that education space, I think it is critical. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question over here.
Thanks. My question is an educational one, and it really goes to the issue of soft skills. So maybe anybody can answer this and have an opinion on this, but what are the kinds of soft skills that should be developed for young designers as they are in programs, no matter what year or level, and how does one actually kind of engender and bring about those sort of soft skills?
I think being able to speak from a student perspective, I think when it comes to soft skills, the universities these days give us an immense amount of knowledge, and they provide us with every sort of tool that we could possibly need. But it's the way that we get given these tools that allow us to generate our own set of sort of ideas and, I suppose, soft skills towards bigger picture sort of thinking. I think it's an interesting perspective as a student we all get told that we have a responsibility, and we all get told about the power that we have as designers, but it's a very difficult thing to live. We never get the opportunity to see the impact of our designs, because we work hard to capture an idea into a product, and then that product doesn't do anything. It's usually kept, or displayed, but there's no real, where has this gone? What have I learned from where it's been, and how do I reflect on that? And I think that's a very interesting thing that universities could take away from.
I think on that as well, I mean, if you're looking at the sort of learning pathways of design students, we can see each year how their design improves. And that's a sort of this application of skills. But we don't necessarily measure, are they collaborating more each year? Are they increasingly thinking creatively? And how do we measure that? We don't measure the hard stuff. And I think it's interesting to look at that space and those soft skills. If we look at the World Economic Forum, several years ago, creativity was down sort of, number 15? No, it's number 3, It's because this idea of moving from what is to what if is increasingly becoming important. So I think that idea of questioning briefs and not just answering briefs, sorry lecturers, is becoming increasingly important. Darren.
I just have to add one thing that I feel is echoing some of the things that we just said. The designers are facilitators, are getting in touch, communicators getting in touch with people, and they need to, they can't have angst, like to talk to people. They need to be able to ask someone questions, and I find that's a soft skill that's often taken for granted. That you can be in a group. When you're employing a UX designer, for example, needs to be someone who's comfortable talking in groups, facilitating workshops, these kind of things. Just wanted to add that. I think we ran out of time, but very, very big thank you. I think we managed to somehow, in German we would say to make a shoe out of it. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be on this panel with you, and thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys.